Hello, everyone. Tonight I want to take you deep into a tale that is whispered about in hushed tones, a story that has lingered on the edges of maps and memory, a story of a village that does not obey the laws of time, a village that appears not on calendars or in archives, but only once every 100 years, a place forgotten by most, but feared by those who have heard its name. They call it the Forgotten Village, though no one seems to remember what it was originally called, perhaps because names fade when a place itself refuses to stay tethered to the world. The story begins in a time long ago, when farmers, traders, and wanderers spoke of a strange cluster of houses hidden deep in the folds of forests and hills. Travelers who claimed to have stumbled upon it described cobblestone streets, wooden homes with flickering lanterns, and villagers who seemed polite but unsettlingly quiet, as if their voices were weighed down by something unseen. They would share bread and drink with strangers, yet their eyes always seemed distant, as though watching something behind you rather than at you. And then, without warning, the village would vanish. Some said it was swallowed by fog. Others said it sank into the ground like a mirage, retreating into the earth. When hunters or curious souls returned to the same place, they would find only wild grass, tangled roots, and the silence of untouched land. Generations passed, and soon it was said that the village appeared only once in a century. Each time it surfaced, it was exactly the same as before, unchanged, frozen, as if it had never aged. The houses bore no cracks, the wells no dust, the trees within its boundary held leaves that did not wither, and the strangest part was this: the people were the same too. Their clothes, their faces, even their mannerisms, always identical to what had been described 100 years earlier. They had not grown older nor younger. They were as if plucked from time and held in an eternal stillness. But there was one truth everyone seemed to agree on: those who entered the village never came back. The earliest records tell of a merchant caravan in the 1600s. A group of traders traveling between towns vanished without a trace. Weeks later, only a single horse returned to its stable, bearing an empty wagon with goods untouched. The animal's eyes were wide with terror, its body thin as though it had not eaten in days, and yet the leather straps showed no signs of wear, no indication that it had traveled the miles it should have. Locals whispered that the caravan had walked into the forgotten village. A century later, a shepherd boy disappeared while chasing after a lost lamb near the hills. The lamb was later found grazing calmly, but the boy's footprints ended at the edge of a clearing where no village stood. Exactly 100 years after that, in the 1800s, a group of scholars intrigued by the folklore set out to document the truth. They were never seen again, though their journals surfaced decades later, found washed up on the banks of a river miles away. The pages were damp, smudged, and incomplete, but one fragment read, "The houses glow though no flame burns, and the people smile without warmth. The bell tolls at midnight, and the air itself becomes heavy. We must leave, yet the paths fold upon themselves. Every turn brings us back to the square. There is no way out." And so the legend deepened, carried by each retelling, until the forgotten village was no longer considered a mere myth, but a curse, a wound in time that opened only once every 100 years. The last supposed sighting was said to be in the early 1900s, when a small hunting party went missing during autumn. Old men in neighboring towns claimed to remember a night of dense fog when the sound of distant bells echoed through the valleys, though no church existed for miles. The next morning the hunters were gone, their camp abandoned, their rifles left leaning against trees, fires still smoldering as if they had only just stepped away. Now, here is where the tale begins to twist, for according to the old cycle, the 100 years are almost over again. If the pattern is true, then the forgotten village should be due to appear once more in our time. And there are already whispers, scattered reports, of strange lights in the woods, of travelers hearing music at night where there should be silence, of lost hikers who claim to have seen windows glowing in the distance, only to vanish into the mist. Some dismiss these accounts as drunken ramblings or tricks of tired eyes, but others feel the weight of history pressing close, as though the village is stirring again, ready to emerge from the dark. One of the most chilling accounts comes from an old letter, written in the year 1908, found in the belongings of a man who disappeared with that hunting party. The letter was addressed to his wife, though it was never sent, tucked instead into the lining of his jacket. It read, "My love, if you receive this, know that I tried to come back. We heard a bell, though none should ring here. The sound pulled us like a tide, and before long we stood before a place that should not exist. The air was thick, the ground damp, but the village stood whole as though painted. On to the night. The people greeted us kindly, but I swear to you, their eyes were hollow. Something watches through them. I feel it pressing on my thoughts. I want to leave, but I cannot find the way. Every path brings me back to their square, where a clock with no hands ticks loudly in the silence. If I do not return, keep our children safe. Tell them never to follow the bells. No one knows how the letter made it out, though some speculate that the man tried to escape and dropped it in the woods before he was pulled back. Whatever the case, it remains one of the few surviving written testimonies about the village. Skeptics call it a forgery, but believers see it as proof of the village's existence, a reminder of the danger that awaits when it appears again. What is the forgotten village, truly? Some say it is a remnant of another time, trapped in a loop, cursed to appear again and again, its people prisoners of some ancient sin. Others claim it is not a village at all, but something older, something that wears the disguise of a settlement to lure the curious inside. Perhaps the villagers are not people at all, but shadows, echoes of those who once lived and were consumed by it, repeating the same gestures endlessly. There are even darker theories, that the village is alive, that it feeds on those who enter, drawing strength from human presence before slipping away again to slumber until the next century. And if that is true, then with each cycle it grows stronger, hungrier, waiting for new souls to wander into its grasp. There are maps, old ones, with faint markings that hint at where the village once stood, though the locations never match. Some place it deep in the Carpathians, others in the Scottish Highlands, others still in forgotten parts of rural Asia. It is said the village does not belong to any land, but drifts, appearing wherever it pleases, wherever the veil between worlds is weakest. That is why no one can predict its exact location, only its time. The century is nearly up, and so the watchers, folklorists, thrill-seekers, believers, wait with anxious hearts. But if you ask the elders in certain remote towns, they will warn you to never seek it out, for the forgotten village does not like to be found. They say those who look for it too eagerly are the ones it notices first, the ones it draws in when the fog rolls thick and the bells begin to ring. And when it has you, when you step through its threshold, the world outside forgets you too. You become part of its stillness, a shadow smiling in the square, waiting for the next century's visitors. And so the silence of the forgotten village lingers like a fog over memory, a silence that does not forget but waits. Some who study these tales insist that the village is not cursed at all but a doorway, a threshold to something beyond our world, perhaps another reality entirely. The idea unsettles even the bravest, for what lies behind such a door? Is it heaven or hell, or something neither human nor divine, something that needs us to step willingly inside so it can keep its grasp on our world? It is a thought that gnaws at you if you linger on it too long, that this place is not trapped here with us. We are trapped here with it, every 100 years merely a chance for it to reach across the veil and pull someone else into its frozen eternity. Reports in recent decades have only added to the unease. In the 1970s, Two hikers in Eastern Europe claim to have stumbled across an abandoned village while navigating an unmarked trail. They described rows of houses in perfect condition, a well in the center, and a clock tower with no hands. They camped nearby, too wary to enter, but throughout the night they heard faint laughter, the creak of footsteps on wooden floors, and the toll of a bell at midnight. When they returned with authorities days later, there was no trace of any settlement, only dense undergrowth where the paths should have been. The hikers' credibility was questioned, but they held to their story until their deaths, one of them even carving a phrase repeatedly into his journals, "The windows watched me." Another unsettling account comes from a young woman in the 1990s who vanished for 3 days during a hiking trip. When she returned, disoriented and dehydrated, she claimed she had been in a village where time did not move. She spoke of kind but silent villagers who gave her food but stared at her as if expecting something. She said she tried to leave but always found herself circling back to the same square with the clock tower. Finally, she said she awoke in the forest as if spat out. Her story was dismissed as hallucination brought on by exhaustion, yet when pressed, she described the architecture of the houses with uncanny detail, matching older accounts almost word for word. Strangely, she died in her sleep only weeks later, her face calm but her hands clenched so tightly that her nails drew blood. Some researchers, fringe as they may be, suggest that the village collects memories as much as it collects souls. That those who step inside are absorbed, their experiences, their identities woven into the fabric of its existence. Perhaps that is why every account describes the villagers as eerily similar, repeating the same motions, the same smiles. They are not living people, but fragments, pieces of those who came before, replayed like broken records. And if that is true, then every disappearance we know of is still there, standing silently in the forgotten village, waiting for us to join them. What chills me most is the bell. Nearly every account speaks of it, tolling at midnight, though no one has ever seen a rope, no hand has ever been seen pulling it. Some describe the sound as metallic and heavy, others as soft and distant, but all agree that once you hear it, it does not leave you. Survivors, few as they are, confess to hearing the echo of that bell in their dreams for the rest of their lives, as though the village is calling them back, whispering, "You are not finished here." It is said that if you hear the bell more than once, you will eventually vanish, drawn back to the village against your will, no matter how far you run. As the 100-year mark approaches again, stories of the forgotten village are resurfacing. Online forums, amateur investigators even thrill, seeking tourists talk about going in search of it. They plan expeditions into the forests, armed with cameras, GPS, and drones, convinced they can capture proof of its existence. But if history is any guide, proof is not what they will find. Proof does not return. The village does not allow evidence to escape. It consumes it, leaving only whispers behind. Perhaps that is its greatest defense. Perhaps that is why it has endured across centuries, never discovered, never destroyed, because it knows how to erase the footprints of those who try to reveal it. And yet, there is a deeper terror in these stories, one that creeps in when you least expect it. The village does not only appear to the lost. Sometimes it is the village that finds you. Accounts exist of people hearing the bell toll from within their own homes, far from the woods, far from the mountains. A traveler once wrote of seeing the village reflected in a puddle on the street, though the ground around him was barren. Another said they awoke in their bed to find the view outside their window had changed, that cobblestone streets stretched out where their driveway should have been, lanterns swaying in a windless night. When they blinked, the scene was gone, but they swore they could still smell smoke from distant chimneys. If the village can reach beyond its borders, then perhaps it is not bound by geography at all, but by attention, by curiosity. The more you think about it, the closer it comes. The more you believe in it, the more real it becomes. So what happens when the century closes and the veil parts again? Will the forgotten village rise in some hidden corner of the world, waiting silently for wanderers to stumble into its grasp? Or will it come looking for us this time, slipping into our towns, our cities, standing just beyond the next street until we find ourselves walking roads that should not exist? Some legends warn that each cycle brings the village closer, that one day it will not vanish after a century but remain, spreading until the world itself forgets what was here before, until the entire earth becomes the forgotten village. The tale leaves us with questions, and perhaps that is its true power. Not answers, but unease, the prickling thought that somewhere, hidden just beyond the reach of maps and reason, there is a place waiting for the century to turn. And maybe, just maybe, when you are walking home one foggy night and hear the faint sound of a bell tolling where no church stands, you will wonder if the village has come for you. You may tell yourself it is nothing, a trick of wind of memory, but you will quicken your step, glance behind you, and feel the weight of eyes that are not there. And if you see a glow ahead, a lantern swinging in the mist, will you follow it? Or will you turn back, never knowing whether you were steps away from the village that appears only once every 100 years? Some stories end with closure, with resolution. This one does not, because the forgotten village is not done. It waits for its hour, for its century to turn again, and when it does, someone will vanish, someone will hear the bell, and someone will walk streets that should not exist. Perhaps it will be a stranger far from here. Or perhaps, listening to these words now, it will be you. So remember, if you ever find yourself lost in fog, if you hear the toll of a bell at midnight where no church stands, do not follow it. Do not seek the glow in the distance. For there are places that are not meant to be found, villages that do not belong to this world, and once you step into their silence, you too will be forgotten.